now. Detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Soft spring wind blows fair across these Ozark Hills tonight. Once again, it is time for A View from the Bunker Live. Tonight, President Trump recognizes Israel's right to the Golan. More embassies are following America's to Jerusalem. Robert Mueller finishes his report and Democrats' heads explode. And Donald Trump takes another stand for life. Our guest segment tonight, the mighty men who were of old are still with us today. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, joins us at the bottom of the hour. And our final segment tonight, we'll talk about a scholar who believes it should be your legal right to set your legal age to whatever age you feel. That's all ahead at A View from the Bunker Live. Welcome. It is March 24th, 2019. I'm Derek Gilbert. Thank you for listening to us tonight. If you're joining us live through Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spotify.com, or the website vftb.net, there's a handy-dandy little player in the right-hand column there where you can listen live. Of course, you can also listen in the archives by subscribing to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify. You can subscribe to any of those. And, of course, we have links to all of those at vftb.net, just to make it simple. And, of course, the easiest way, just download the free mobile app. The free mobile app delivers these programs right to you, bypasses social media and the filters and the gatekeepers, and gets it right to your smartphone or tablet, whether it's an Android device or an Apple device. We've got links to the iTunes App Store and Google Play at vftb.net. If you prefer YouTube, we upload the audio here to youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, along with the weekly Bible study that Sharon and I produce, the Gilbert House Fellowship. You'll find that there as well, along with occasional videos that I eventually, sometimes have time to produce. So you'll find all of that there at my YouTube channel. Social media, yeah, we're there. Facebook.com/ViewFromTheBunker. On Twitter, you'll find this program at ViewFromBunker, at ViewFromBunker, that is. Or my personal Twitter handle is at Derek Gilbert. That's DEREK. The correct way to spell the name. And also at oneway.com, which is a new social media site run by a Christian, which means you don't get the filter that you get at Twitter, Facebook, and some of the others. And none of the ads either, which is really nice. In the background, you hear our in-studio audience. That is Sam T. Dachshund. And he's decided that I am disturbing his rest, so he is heading out the door. You might hear some noise in the background as well tonight, because it is a really beautiful night here in Missouri as spring has finally arrived. Things are greening up. The pollen is in the air. You might hear that if I don't have the noise gate on the mic set correctly as we deal with the omnipresent post-nasal drip at this time of year. But you might hear birds or coyotes in the background because the window's open in the studio tonight, which is not something one would normally do in a real broadcast studio. Now, since Sam is up and moving around, I cannot guarantee that he's not going to demand a trip outside at some point, so be prepared for an emergency break, but hopefully that will take care of it for the evening. He's on a schedule. He's one of those dogs that has a routine, and if you don't stick to the routine, he gets really grumpy. I mean, he will stare. He's perfected the art of mind control. Those beady black little eyes boring into you like lasers. So anyway, be prepared for that. At the bottom of the hour, as we said, Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy and one of the featured speakers at the Hear the Watchman conference next weekend in Dallas. We'll finally get a chance to meet Gary face-to-face. He's been a guest on this program, just once so far, which is, I am remiss. It was almost 2 years ago to the day when Gary was last on the program. And now, like I said, we finally get a chance to meet, and we will talk about his book, his talk in Dallas, and, of course, we will remind you before the end of the program how you can participate in the conference in Dallas, even if you can't be in Dallas. So, by the way, if you're listening live tonight at Spreaker.com, you will find the chat room open. So if you want to join in, toss questions at us as we get the interview segment underway, feel free to do that. Again, Spreaker.com, or just follow the link from vftb.net. In the news this week, Donald Trump has got the Democrats back on their heels. And I, try not to make this program too political because you get plenty of that all week long with regular talk radio. I did my stint 18 months in daily secular talk radio. I could only stand it 4 days a week. My Friday afternoon show, as I was wedged in between, how did the schedule go? It was Sean Hannity and then Michael Savage. And I did the local segment in between. And by Friday afternoon, I'd had enough of it. And so we did, the kind of thing we do on A View from the Bunker. Brought in guests like Russ Dizdar and Tom Horn, Michael Heiser and stuff like that, and talked about stuff that, because I figured by 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, the political fighting was just a little much. We were ready for the weekend, so let's talk about something different. Anyway, so I try not to get too political, but it's hard to avoid here, especially the last couple of years. Things have just gotten crazy. I mean, we live in a political world, and so we at least have to be aware of what's going on out there, even as we Christians realize that the political realm is not how we will save our family members, our colleagues, our coworkers who don't yet know Jesus Christ. We are not going to vote Jesus into their hearts. But we still have to live peaceably, live in the world, and so we have to pay attention to what goes on. Donald Trump has recognized the right of Israel, the sovereignty of Israel over the Golan Heights. Now, if you look at a map of Israel, it's the northeast corner, essentially, north and east of the Sea of Galilee. And the reason that's an important area, by the way, which Israel captured from Syria during the Six-Day War back in 1967, the reason it's important is that it is high ground from which, artillery pieces could be mounted that could essentially hit every important city in Israel. So Israel is never going to give that up, nor should they, in my view. Yet the world considers it, even though Israel formally annexed it in 1981, so Israel has occupied it for more than 50 years, they have formally claimed sovereignty over it for the last 38. Donald Trump is just recognizing the reality on the ground. Israel owns it. They're not going to give it up, so And yet there are political pundits here in the United States saying that this shouldn't be because this will set a bad precedent for some other nation to come along and decide they can take some piece of ground by force and then claim its ownership because they conquered it. Excuse me, but hasn't this been the way of the world since, Eden? I mean, how did the United States come to occupy everything on the North American continent from the Rio Grande to the Canadian border and from California to, from Virginia to California? We basically took a lot of it away from the Brits, the Native Americans, and the Mexicans. So for us to say now, Israel doesn't have any right to do this, seems a little disingenuous on the part of American political commentators. This kind of thing happens all the time. Ownership by right of military conquest. So, anyway, the Israeli government obviously very happy about this. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issuing a statement almost immediately. But it had been signaled early last week. Senator Lindsey Graham went over there and announced he was going to come back to the United States and push for it. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And so the announcement was made Thursday, and it's been confirmed by Israel's foreign minister that the president will sign an executive order making it official within the coming days. And on the heels of this, more embassies are moving to Jerusalem. Romania's Prime Minister Viorica, I probably won't get this right, Dancila, that's a guess. Anyway, today, Sunday, she told the annual AIPAC conference, that's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, that the Romanian government will seek to relocate its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Guatemala has also done so, and Honduras likewise announced the opening of a diplomatic office in Jerusalem and may eventually move its embassy as well. The interesting thing about Romania's announcement is that the president of Romania, Klaus Iohannis, said that the final decision on relocating the diplomatic mission rests with me. So it's not clear yet that this move by the Romanian government is official, but we'll see. Anyway, AIPAC is a very powerful political action committee in the United States and wields a lot of influence both with Republicans and Democrats. But again, Israel has held Jerusalem for 70 years. The seat of government is there, and for any government not to recognize it as the capital of Israel is just playing pretend. With Democrats, though, this is becoming a real political football. It's dividing the party. A number of Democratic candidates for president are not going to attend the AIPAC convention this week, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Bernie Sanders, former U.S. Representative Robert Francis O'Rourke, Senator Kamala Harris, and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. They've decided not to attend. MoveOn.org is putting a lot of pressure on Democrats not to do anything, I guess, that shows support of Israel. This in the wake of the flap inside the party over Ilhan Omar and her anti-Semitic comments, and the fact that the Democratic Party in Congress, representatives, could not basically punish her, not even slap her on the wrist, because there are some very aggressive and segments within the Democratic Party at the national level who are very anti-Israel. So this is interesting as we move into the 2020 presidential campaign season. The Democratic Party is beginning to show some cracks around the edges. And as I predicted, Sam T. Dachshund is, in fact, giving me the stare, which means we're going to take an unplanned break. We come back, Donald Trump, he's going to force colleges to choose between free speech on campus and federal funding. That's ahead as A View from the Bunker continues.
From the Garden of Eden to our current day, dark Luciferian entities have worked to destroy mankind, while biblical prophecy points to a soon-coming war between earthly governments and a clash of colossal proportions. Dr. Thomas Horn says you cannot understand much of the Bible unless you read and grasp the revelations in the Gods of War Super Collection. For your $35 donation during this very limited time offer, you'll receive The Alliance of Evil, the groundbreaking new book by Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, which unveils the prophetic new dual Cold War between the U.S., Russia, and China unfolding across the global spectrum now. The Gods of Ground Zero, that explains the supernatural forces operating behind current global events. And The Last Clash of the Titans, which analyzes the most overlooked prophecies in the Bible and explains how Jesus Christ himself will soon go to war against the gods of antiquity. But with this 3-volume critical collection, you'll also receive completely free of charge the brand new, never before released, full-length DVD, War of the Gods, Volume 1, Search for the Titans. Walk one-on-one with your personal guides, Derek and Sharon Gilbert, through a tour of the Holy Land, including Shiloh, Bethel, and Mount Hermon. You will see where the final battle between God and the rebel angels will take place. And you'll explore for yourself Sardinia's megalithic tombs of the giants, their connection to the ancient Canaanites, and the final battle. And that's not all. You'll also receive for a very limited time the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas R. Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America. Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality. Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies, and unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. But we're still not done. Skywatch TV's Off the Record series is back by popular demand with a brand new, never-before-aired DVD, The Gods of War Edition, featuring exclusive interviews with Detective Carl Gallups, Senior Pentagon Analyst Robert McGinnis, Derek and Sharon Gilbert on the coming hyper battle between the forces of God and the titans of biblical prophecy. This content is only available in this exclusive offer and will not be aired anywhere else. Included for a limited time with the Gods of War Super Collection. This unprecedented collection, sold separately, holds a retail value of $220. All 6 items yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. This, without a doubt, is the largest special offer of the summer and is available only while supplies last. So don't delay. The Gods of War Super Collection, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order online or call 1-844-750-4985.
Probably the only guy under the age of, well, who's breathing this weekend, not watching the NCAA tournament. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Coming up in just a few minutes, Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, joins us. Until then, a few more items in the news this week. Of course, the one that everybody was waiting for and has been waiting for the last 2 years, and of course, that is the Robert Mueller report. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, who was appointed to look for evidence of collusion between the Trump presidential campaign and the guys in the Kremlin. The report was delivered to Attorney General William Barr on Friday. Barr has released his 4-page summary of the findings of Mueller. I've not had time to read it this afternoon because it was released today, Sunday, in Washington, D.C., but news agencies are reporting it. It was leaked early. In fact, it was leaked Friday. And even as of Friday, the news media, the news networks were aware that there were no new indictments forthcoming, which means that even though the Mueller team indicted 37 people and got convictions on a couple of process crimes, Paul Manafort most notably, there were absolutely no indictments issued that had anything to do with the original purpose of this investigation, which was to find some collusion between the government of Russia and Donald J. Trump. So, quoting from Barr and his 4-page letter, the special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 presidential election, end quote. Now, that should be the end of the Russia thing, right? Well, in a rational world, you would be correct. But this is politics. It doesn't have to be rational. Democratic Representative Jerry Nadler of New York, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee, has already said, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. In other words, they're going to keep pushing the narrative, even though they're not going to file for. I would be shocked if they actually filed for impeachment hearings. I don't think that's in the cards. Nancy Pelosi remembers what happened when the Republicans did that to Bill Clinton. It turned out to be a big win in the next election for the Democrats. She's not going to do that, but they will keep saying things like what Nadler has been saying to the press all weekend. What other Democrats have been saying, okay, well, they didn't indict anybody, but it doesn't mean he didn't do something. So, Barr also found no obstruction of justice, writing in conjunction with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Quote, they concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense, end quote. So there's no obstruction charge that can be laid either. So this team of 40 FBI agents, which issued over 2,800 subpoenas, executed nearly 500 search warrants, and obtained over 230 orders for communication records, issued 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence, interviewed about 500 witnesses, and zero indictments for collusion, which, by the way, isn't even illegal. So, Democrats are now shifting the narrative. They're saying, well, this wasn't really that important. Look over here. Southern District of New York. Prosecutors in New York, the Southern District of New York, are looking into campaign finance violations that may have occurred if Donald Trump actually directed Michael Cohen to hand out payments to Stormy Daniels and another woman whose name I forget to try to circumvent campaign finance law. That's still questionable. See, but even if that is true, that does not rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. So essentially, this is not going to be the big win the Democrats were hoping for. Even CNN on Friday was finding it hard to spin this as anything other than a big win for Donald Trump. Matt Taibbi, who's a journalist, usually writes at Rolling Stone, has got a new book coming out and just released a chapter from it because it deals with the Russiagate thing. The one real consequence from this whole thing is the way the media, America's news media, has really, really trashed itself in going after Donald Trump. They abandoned any pretense of being nonpartisan, of being objective, and they went with a totally politicized approach to reporting on this whole mess. And in so doing, especially now with Mueller's conclusion, as we really ramp up the presidential campaign season, not only has the mainstream media proven itself to be even, about as reliable as the United States Congress, they've also handed Donald Trump a huge issue that he can use to his advantage in the campaign. This is a big campaign win for Donald Trump. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen tomorrow with another head of state. This would be Theresa May in the UK. According to the Sunday Times there, a group of ministers who make up her cabinet, I mean the people that work for her as the administration of the government of the United Kingdom, gathered together on Saturday to come up with a plan to replace her as the prime minister. Senior ministers, apparently, according to the Sunday Times, agreed that May needs to step down, and this is because they're really unhappy with the way she's dealing with the Brexit issue. Now, the question is it that they're unhappy at the way she's dealing with it, or again, they're still trying to figure a way to avoid having to leave the European Union, even though the majority of people in the UK want to get out? Not quite sure. However, the BBC reported today that two of the ministers who were mentioned as possible interim prime minister candidates, if May were to resign, both said that they fully back Theresa May. Now, does that mean they really don't want to take her place? They're loyal to her? Or is that like, when a general manager of a baseball team says we have full confidence in our manager a week before firing him? We'll see. This whole Brexit thing is really a mess, and if it doesn't get sorted, the UK leaves the EU under no deal by default this coming Friday. Donald Trump going to force colleges and universities in the United States to protect free speech if they want federal funding for research. On Thursday, he signed an executive order to promote free speech on college campuses by threatening them with the loss of federal research money if they don't protect those rights. Colleges and universities, which for some odd reason we thought were bastions of intellectual inquiry, a place where one could exchange ideas with others without fear of being condemned or ostracized, which of course have become echo chambers for social justice warriors over the last couple of years especially. Well, Donald Trump has directed 12 grant-making agencies inside the federal government to use their authority in coordination with the Office of Management and Budget to ensure that institutions that get federal research funding or education grants promote free speech and free inquiry. This could apply to more than $35 billion the federal government hands out to universities around the country. Public universities want this funding will have to comply with the First Amendment. Private universities, which have a little more flexibility, would just need to commit to their own institutional rules. But still, this is another brilliant political move by the president. This may not really affect any funding on the part of what universities receive for the work that they do, but it may force Democrats to take a stand on this issue just because it's Donald Trump. I'm waiting. I have not really dug into this. I need to do a little digging to find out what kind of reaction this got from the progressive community. Because, the way things are in America today, if Donald Trump came out in favor of oxygen, you'd have progressives putting plastic bags over their heads just to protest. And by the way, musician Dr. Dre bragging on his daughter in the wake of the scandal that snagged a couple of fairly prominent Hollywood actresses who essentially paid to get their kids into the universities that they wanted to go to. Paid a lot of money. Paid other people to take tests. Paid athletic departments to create scholarships to admit their kids for sports that they didn't even play. And Dr. Dre posted a photo of himself on Instagram Saturday with his daughter holding her admission letter from the University of Southern California. And he captioned the post, "My daughter got accepted into USC all on her own, no jail time." Which is kind of a dig at those parents who did pay to get their kids into USC. Actresses Lori Loughlin and others. But we do note that Dr. Dre donated $70 million to USC about 6 years ago to start a center for arts and technology. So I'm sure that had nothing to do with his daughter getting into USC. And one final note, and I say this is about time. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which has for years gone after conservatives and Christians on the lists of hate groups that they compile, which are used by groups like, tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Amazon to identify hate groups that should be barred from using the internet. The Southern Poverty Law Center is apparently imploding because of, shall we say, improprieties. Co-founder Morris Dees was tossed out last week over sexual misconduct claims. 24 employees of the Southern Poverty Law Center signed a letter of concern over allegations of mistreatment, sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and racism, which is basically what the Southern Poverty Law Center is supposed to fight, or at least that's what they claim that they fight. So Dees was tossed out last week. This week, the head of the SPLC, Richard Cohen, and the organization's legal director, Rhonda Brownstein, both resigned on Friday. Cohen had been with the SPLC for 33 years. Earlier in the week, the SPLC Board of Directors appointed Michelle Obama's former chief of staff, Tina Chen, who, by the way, was involved behind the scenes in trying to pull strings for Jussie Smollett. Remember that guy? Actor on the television series Empire on Fox, the one who staged the hate crime in Chicago because he was unhappy with his raise or something. So he wanted to raise his profile by staging a hate crime on a night where the wind chill was like 10 below zero. Anyway, she was trying, that's another story. Anyway, Chen is involved heading up the inquiry into the sexual misconduct claims at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Rhonda Brownstein, its legal director, out on Friday as well. The Southern Poverty Law Center has made a lot of money over the years by convincing, and this is, by the way, an expose in the Washington Examiner on Friday, based on an interview with a former employee named Bob Moser, who said that the SPLC's co-founder Morris Dees discovered very early on that he could rake in a lot of cash by convincing gullible northern liberals that the Southern Poverty Law Center was doing the hard work of fighting hate. But the actual mission of combating bigotry didn't really matter, according to Moser. He said it's just simply a business choice. They found that people respond to it. They salve their own guilty conscience by sending checks to the SPLC. And in order to keep the money coming in, the Southern Poverty Law Center kept looking for new groups to add to its hate lists. And so it would add groups like Christian groups taking a stand for biblical morality alongside actual neo-Nazis. And that kept the money coming in. According to Moser, the SPLC's business model centers entirely around keeping its donors in constant fear using gimmicks such as hate maps and hate lists. And here's the irony. If this group has been around for decades and they're doing such a great job in fighting hate, why do the hate lists keep growing? At some point, wouldn't somebody on his donor list say, hey, wait a minute, why do I keep sending you money? You guys don't seem to be doing a very good job. But no. Well, anyway, it appears the leadership of the SPLC in disarray and former employees who are sick of exploiting what is unquestionably still a problem among human. Hey, look, there will be hatred, bigotry, racism, sexism as long as humans walk this earth. But compiling hate maps and then using it to, well, how did Dees put it? Convincing gullible northern liberals that the only way to fight it is to send him money? That ain't going to fix it. Well, we're going to come to the interview segment. We're going to talk about an event on a mountaintop that took place more than 5,000 years ago and how it is still affecting us today, how it will affect us in the future, and not in a good way. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, joins us next. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.
For thousands of years, the world has heard warning that there is a coming day when the man of sin, the Antichrist, will arise to pilot the greatest deception in human history. Prepare yourself now for what is ahead with the coming Third Temple Collection. This incredible assortment features Dr. Thomas Horn's new book, The Rabbis, Donald Trump, and the Top Secret Plan to Build the Third Temple, where you'll learn why many believe President Trump is a King Cyrus-like figure, guided by Hashem, God himself. The connection between Donald Trump, rabbis, and a behind-the-scenes scheme to erect the Third Temple, and how this, as the book of Daniel prophesied, will be the catalyst that precedes the apocalypse and arrival of Antichrist. All this and so much more. This unbelievable collection also includes best-selling author Carl Gallup's brand new book, The Rabbi, The Secret Message, and the Identity of Messiah, which reveals how Israel's most venerated Orthodox rabbi, Yitzhak Kaduri, came face-to-face with the true Messiah and said that it was Jesus Christ. You may know that much of the story, but now you can learn what's happened since. Discover the secrets, witness tampering, intimidation tactics, global media, and powerful personalities who will stop at nothing, including death threats and even ritualistic curses to cover up this new stunning revelation. But we're just getting started. The coming Third Temple Collection also includes Shelley Neese's new book, The Copper Scroll Project, that highlights the decades-long quest to uncover Qumran's greatest secrets, the lost treasures of the Jerusalem Temple. Hold on to your hats as you'll also discover how the Dead Sea Scrolls were merely the tip of the archaeological iceberg as Jim Barfield's Copper Scroll Project tethers to Israel's modern battle for the Temple Mount, and how the secrets contained in the Copper Scroll, the most enigmatic of the Dead Sea Scrolls, might hold the key to one of the greatest treasures in Israel's history. But that's not all. You'll also receive the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America, Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies, and unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. Also included in this amazing collection, the original 4-week investigative Skywatch television series regarding the coming Third Temple on DVD, featuring Carl Gallups, Shelley Neese, and Dr. Thomas Horn. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $180. Yours now for your donation of only $30 plus shipping and handling. Now's your chance to save big. The coming Third Temple Collection, available now at Skywatch TV Store. Order online or call 844-750-4985.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Driving the internet to think. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week, well, next week's program will actually be pre-recorded. We'll talk about the overlap between the UFO phenomenon and end times prophecy with Darren Geisinger and his use of fiction to tell that story. Again, that'll be next Sunday night, March 31st, here on A View from the Bunker. Our guest now is one who's got a book that has really been eye-opening, I think, for many people. And it covers a lot of the same information, or the same ground, I should say, that I cover in my research, but he approaches it from a different perspective, which is why I really enjoy talking with him. It's been a couple of years since he's been on the program, but he's one of the featured speakers at the Hear the Watchman conference coming to Dallas next weekend. Looking forward to meeting him for the first time. He calls himself a Christian contrarian who has studied the Bible, Gnostic scriptures, the Quran, and various other ancient epics and secret society publications to come up with the research behind his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Mankind. His website is genesis6conspiracy.com, and we are honored to welcome Gary Wayne back to the program. Gary, good to talk with you again.
Well, thank you for having me back, and so happy to be with you tonight.
This is an area of research that when I first began down this road of realizing that the Bible was true and that the story that was told in the New Testament was anchored by the eyewitness accounts of the resurrected Jesus, and therefore the Old Testament was true, it still took me a while to get to the point of saying, okay, yeah, maybe there's some history here in Genesis chapter 6 as well. I've since changed my view on that. What was it that got you interested in the story of the mighty men who were of old?
Yeah, I kind of backed into it. So what I was doing a process of cataloging all of the different prophecy narratives that run throughout the Bible, right from Genesis right through to the end of Revelations. And there's so many different directions that it runs, so I wanted to just sort of catalog that. So, very quickly on as you're doing that, and like you, I hadn't paid much attention to Genesis 6 before that. You run across this very strange set of 4 verses. That's the preamble to the flood story. And I just kind of, no. I'm not going there. I'm not going to get into that. And continued along my way. And then as I'm cataloging, these giants show up after the flood and all these different names for the Rephaim nations. And, by the time you get into, Isaiah and you're into some of these things like the satyrs and the dragons and the Liliths and all of these other things that are going on. And then you get into the New Testament and you've got the demons and you've got angels and you've got, war in heaven in Revelation 12. You've got the abyss. And so what I thought I would do to see whether or not I could get published and I could write and it would be accepted and things like that is I thought I would start my first book by trying to connect what I thought would be a short story, Genesis 6, with the end time, because it shows up in the end time. And so when I started along that trek, I didn't think it would take me over, 12 years to write the book. And I didn't think it would be probably the longest book that I would ever write. But every time I thought I was done, I was shown I wasn't done. And I just needed to keep digging and going down more rabbit holes. But the thing is, I went down so many rabbit holes, I didn't know whether I was ever going to come up.
How did you start connecting the story of Genesis 6 to, as your website describes it, the giants who walk among us today, the secret societies? How did that all come together?
Yeah, because, first of all, I was wanting to do it just with sort of inside the Bible. And then I thought, I know a lot about mythology and I know a lot about ancient history. And I know that there's so many things that are really almost like a parallel polytheist version of what's written in Genesis. So I thought I'd add that in just so that people could see the consistency of the prehistory story that's around the world. And then, of course, when you start digging deeper into the mythology and whatever we have for history, whether it's Josephus or whatever ancient historian that you're going to use, you learn that it's deeply tied and connected to the religion. So then I decided, well, I should probably read as much of the Rig Vedas and the Upanishads and, even the Book of Mormon in the West or the Popol Vuh of the Kishamaya. I needed to read all of the Gnostic Gospels, and I needed to learn sort of as much as I wanted because I didn't want to take their history or their stories out of context from what maybe the religious aspect might have to show me. And of course, when I went into that led me into the mystery schools, and that led me into the secret societies. And when I got into the secret societies, and particularly with a fellow by the name of Albert Mackey, who also got me interested in their Polychronicon as well, he writes the history of Freemasonry from the Polychronicon and many of the legends, not all of them, and recorded it in terms of what was the oral history and that became the written history. And so I learned in that they believed in what happened before the flood and after the flood, and had, again, a very, very similar story, and took their creation back to the same period before the flood. So their creation was an offshoot of what the descendants of Cain were doing with the knowledge that they had learned and passed on that they say came from Adam and Eden, that then married up with this knowledge given to them from, as first book of Enoch talks about, and other mythologies around the world, that add this illicit knowledge that just sort of accelerates this knowledge. And to handle this knowledge, they developed the mystical sun worshipping religion and the mystery schools and secret societies to develop this knowledge. And of course, at the same time, you have the giants coming in to form this sort of greater antediluvian organizational structure of conspiracy and rebellion.
So is this similar then to the magicians, the priests, the occultists of Babylon in, say, the time of the patriarchs, the time of Abraham? They sort of had this idea that it was their access to knowledge from before the flood that had been preserved, they thought, by Gilgamesh, who was called master of the Apkallu. And the Apkallu were the semi-divine entities that had been sent forth by the god of wisdom and witchcraft, Enki, to deliver the gifts of civilization to mankind, by which I mean the gifts that the Watchers delivered on Mount Hermon of cutting roots and telling of fortunes and reading the stars, et cetera, et cetera. Is that what has been preserved? Is that the history that Mackey recorded, that somehow this pre-flood knowledge has been preserved?
Essentially, yes, because as you and I have talked about, is Gilgamesh comes after Enbar-Akar, or third generation after the flood, according to the Sumerian kings list, and third generation, which is Nimrod. And Nimrod and Enbar-Akar have almost an identical sort of story and track, building the same type of Babel tower, only at Eridu, which is in Shinar anyways. Mm-hmm. So you get all of these similarities. And so Gilgamesh comes after. So what he does is he actually gets that information from Nimrod, according to what the Masons believe. So what they teach is that Hermes finds the two pillars of Lamech of the Cain side, as opposed to the Jared side, which has the location of all of the knowledge of Enoch, of Cain, not son of Jared. That's written down in 36,525 books. And it's stacked in 9 vaults, stacked on top of each other underneath the pyramids in Egypt. And Hermes goes and gets that knowledge and brings it back to Shinar and partners with Nimrod to apply that knowledge to build Babel City and Babel Tower, and initiates 1,000 people into the art of masonry, which is the 5th science of geometry and the 7 sacred sciences. And we get a hint of that, in the language in Genesis, where it talks about Babel, that working as one people with one language. There's nothing that is going to be prevented from them from doing. And of course, what the first thing they do is they build Babel Tower. And of course, after the dispersion, Nimrod stays in Sumer and Shinar. So this knowledge is going to be passed down through the Magi, who are the priests, right? That's the religious aspect, which is the same as wizards, as they're allegorized from the ring lords and antediluvian history. So anytime you see Magi, priest, magician, shaman, that's just the priest of the polytheist religion and part of that organizational structure. So yeah, it ends up being the same source and story as you're talking about from Gilgamesh.
Well, that tracks, and I don't want to take too far away from your research, but that really tracks with some digging I did a while back on who it was that the high-level Scottish Rite Freemasons were venerating. Why they used this double-headed eagle, so-called the double-headed eagle of Lagash, which is a city in ancient Sumer. But it turned out that symbol really doesn't predate the Hittite Empire. So it really didn't go back to, in historically speaking, it didn't go back to Sumer, but yet the modern Masons wanted to believe that it does. And I concluded that even though Solomon is supposedly the one, and Hiram Abiff was the builder of Solomon's temple, that's not the temple they were looking at. It was actually Babel and Nimrod that they were looking back to, and he was the builder that they venerated.
Yeah, and you're exactly true that they do believe that double-headed eagle goes back to the Anunnaki of Sumeria, and that sort of raven-type look, right? And whether or not that's true or not, that's not really what's important. What's important is they believe it, and what they believe is important to understand is what they do with that information and their beliefs.
Right. Gary Wayne, the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracies, our guest on A View from the Bunker. And that's the key question. Why does all of this arcane, ancient knowledge matter to us today? Why do these stories matter? Why does the Genesis 6 account matter to us today? How is it affecting our world right now?
It's a couple of principles that sort of is, for me, sort of a requisite in understanding the Bible historically today and into prophecy. And from a literal perspective, just as what you were discussing, I believe that the Bible, if there's anything that is sort of allegorical, you can define that within the Bible to get its true meaning. You don't need to go outside the Bible for that. So if you're going to understand prophecy, you're going to need to understand post-Diluvian history and antediluvian history, because that starts to make things a lot more clear when you're dealing with the angelic rebellion or with the creation of the demons or what's ever locked into the abyss. You need to understand all of that if you're going to properly address what prophecy is talking about.
Yeah, we're right on the same lines there. So when you do that, then, and you're looking at what the Bible, what the prophets of old, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Daniel were talking about, we can see hints of the story perhaps told from the perspective of the enemy when we're looking at the myths and legends of the Greeks, the Romans, the Norse, the Hindus, and so forth. Do I have that right?
Oh, I think so. And when we look at what the spurious forces or the rebellious forces are trying to actually bring about, they're looking at things from their polytheist lens, and through that, how they're going to bring about the end time. So what we know from a biblical perspective is the end time is going to come about. But it's not necessarily from just happenstance. I think there's more planned, contrived, plotting to bring this rendezvous with destiny about. The thing that they can't do, though, is bring about the end time on their own timetable. They're trying to, but they will accept the ordained time after the restrainer is moved if they have to, and of course they will. So if we understand those pieces of the components, and we understand sort of that organizational structure that comes out of prehistory that crossed the flood that's still in place today, we understand these are the forces that are at work to bring about the universal religion and the world government, and to basically try and destroy as many humans as they can. And then things start to come into focus that when Jesus says things like in Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and in Luke, the end time or his second coming is going to be like the days of Noah, and this is under the veil of the signs of the times that the disciples specifically asked them, that we need to understand what happened in the times of Noah, as well as that people weren't expecting the flood, which is also a very important piece of that as the example that's provided, because we all know prophecy, but yet people are going to be totally surprised and deceived in the end time, even the elect, if that were possible, and Matthew says it is. So when we want to understand what was going on in the days of Noah, the first thing we need to understand is that that is the exact language that is described in Genesis when it gives Noah's age of 950 years, and he lived 350 years after the flood.
Right.
And 600 years before the flood. So I think we need to understand both, just as Babel is the root allegory for Babylon in the end time. Mm-hmm. And just as Luke, when he describes the days of Noah, he ties that to the days of Lot.
Right.
And Sodom and Gomorrah, which could be another second incursion there. But it also is a destruction by fire, which is the destruction of the coming in the end time, as opposed to the first apocalypse by water. So you have that as a tie-in as well. And then you have the 600 years before the flood, where you have the Nephilim created, and you have the total corruption of the whole world. And I think that goes greater than just violence and doing evil to one another. Because if you take that word back to Hebrew, that's the word shakath. And that has a greater meaning than just violence. It's actually corrupted, then the whole world is corrupted. That is talking about decay and spoil and ruin. And I think the whole world was ruined, the whole earth was ruined, just as the Bible says, both in the genomes of the plants and in the DNA of all of the different peoples for the most part, and the beings, the animals. And I think that's why God calls the animals to the ark, because he knows the ones that haven't been degraded with this corruption.
Right.
So when we start to understand that nothing is new under the sun, and we're told to understand what happened in the days of Noah, we need to open up our minds to the idea that we're going to have an impact in the end time, just as it happened before the flood and after the flood. And again, Babel is that typical rebellion story that, the end time is really all about, with an Antichrist type figure. And you have this apocalypse, and you have the influence of the giants on both sides of the flood.
So how is it affecting us on this side of the flood? I mean, the description of your book at the website, Genesis6conspiracy.com, starts with the compelling line, "There are giants among us passing largely unnoticed, intent on carrying out a secret plan to enslave all humanity. They may not look like giants today, but their bloodlines go back all the way back to the Nephilim. So we can't spot them. What is this conspiracy that they're working in, and what are the how are they trying to put this plan into action?"
Well, it's been a plan that's been in action since the rebellion of Cain and the creation, 6 generations later, of the original Nephilim, that has this rebellion against God. So the whole idea is to destroy humankind from the face of the earth, and to take their commission that was granted to Adam to be raised higher than angels in the future time as an adopted brother of Jesus after, because of his resurrection. It's designed to prevent that. And so now if we look at where the Nephilim or the giants fit into that ancient organizational structure, is these were monsters who were great warriors and had great physical strength and were literally giants. A lot of speculation as to how large, but let's say at least 20 feet tall, probably in the first generation, probably taller. And they easily took over the governing bodies and the kingships of the antediluvian world and enslaved humankind under this polytheist infrastructure of the religion enforced by the giants and backed by the fallen angels. This is the same organizational structure that crosses the flood. So now when you look at the dynasties of these kings that are formed early on after the flood, and that Nimrod is going to marry into, these are the bloodlines that have continued to intermarry all down through history and even up to this day. And this is the royal families and the noble elite, which is that sort of feudal system that was set up for millennia based on them establishing themselves as the divine representatives of God and then all of their family as the ruling class. And this is the same people that are working in the backgrounds today to bring about the end time.
So they take divine right of kings literally.
They do, and King James was famous for that. And, of course, he is part of the Stuart dynasty, which they call the Unicorn dynasty, which is one of the most ennobled of the bloodlines that are out there and one of the leading candidates for Antichrist, because what they believe is that Antichrist is going to come from one of the bloodlines in the West, and they keep 3 of those Antichrists ready all of the time. So they're one of the families that want to be able to present Antichrist.
Yeah, and as we talked before, and I think we did this a couple of years ago, I mentioned that's why Sharon chose to use the family names Stewart and Sinclair in her series of novels, The Red Wing Saga. Because they're the ones.
Choice.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, they're the ones that the enemies are trying to, that the fallen realm is trying to manipulate and to bring forth the Antichrist. So now, how does this work then? I mean, the giants were in the earth in those days. We assume that when the flood of Noah swept over the land, they were all destroyed, creating the watcher spirits of the giants became the demons that have afflicted the world since then. The bloodline of Nimrod that he married into is the bloodline that these royal houses of Europe have been tracing their ancestry back to, since then. So, almost 6,000 years at this point. How do they think that they're actually going to bring forth the Antichrist from this point? What are their plans going forward?
Well, they do have, essentially control today, not quite the lockdown control that they're looking for, and that'll come when they establish the 10 empires of the end time. So they're always working to put together this world government and this universal religion, and it's all part of their religious sort of requirement so that they believe that they can evolve, or as the New Age would say, vibrate into godhood. So that they can collect that spark of the divine, also known as 1,000 points of light. But what they do is they initiate the purebloods from childhood. And out of that, there in every generation, they have a select few, as I say, that they have ready to present as Antichrist once everything comes into place for him to step in and just take over, just as we're told Antichrist will by, the 10 kings giving him this power in the middle of the last 7 years, and I think he overthrows 3 of them in that process. So it's not like he has to march armies all around the world, and so these initiates from childhood, they take obviously the most pure blood and the most talented and the smartest, and they're like Mensa level, as they like to say. And so they are initiated from childhood. And you might hear of them out there when somebody says something that's rather out of the ordinary, and they say, this person is a 32nd degree Scottish Rite adept. Well, that's an impossibility, because you have to be 33rd degree or 3rd degree York Rite to be an adept. What they're saying is that you have to be a certain age to actually be able to accept the adept title and degree. So they call them a 32nd degree adept in the Scottish Rite. So if you hear that, that's generally what they're talking about, is somebody who's part of the pure bloodlines and been initiated since childhood. So they're ready to go whenever they get the chance. And, of course, when they do get the chance, he will be the one that steps up and is going to be part of that negotiation, I think, to create that covenant that Daniel is talking about that sets up the last 7 years.
We're talking with Gary Wayne. He is the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and talking about the secret societies or the secret plans behind the scenes to try to bring forth the Antichrist in our world. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about and this is my own selfish nature, I guess, because I'm proud of my wife, the Stewarts and the Sinclairs. Why are those bloodlines so important to the fallen realm? And give you a little insight into Sharon's Red Wing saga as A View from the Bunker continues. I'm Derek Gilbert.
Jack the Ripper's dark deeds actually began long before 1888. And it wasn't a mere man who committed the crimes, but a demon in league with devilish men, a group of men called Red Wing. Only one small group of valiant men and women stand against this evil, a group that place their faith in Christ alone, and they protect a secret of blood that Red Wing hopes to use to usher in the reign of Antichrist and the end of day.
Red Wing is called Red Wing because they want to kill the church. They want to forever stop Christ from coming back. So it's the Holy Spirit, the dove, with a murdered, has been slain, a wounded dove. Ultimately, we still have to remember that the one who is in control is God Almighty, and we have to go to Him, and we have to suit up every time we go out.
The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert.
Book 1.
Blood Lies.
Book 2.
Blood Rights.
Book 3.
The Blood is the Life.
Book 4.
Realms of Stone.
And now available Book 5.
Realms of Fire. Available at SkywatchTVStore.com. Paperback and Kindle at Amazon.com. Characters you'll love and a story you can't put down. The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert. Coming to you live every Sunday night from the heart of the Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. We talked about eugenics last week, weeding out the unfit. That's still with us, and President Trump has taken a stand against it. We'll talk about that at the bottom of the hour. But now we continue our discussion, fascinating always, and going by much too quickly, with the author of The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Mankind, Gary Wayne, with us. And Gary has been very gracious in just allowing me to kind of throw whatever questions come to mind as we talk, which I really appreciate, because this is a subject that I'm fascinated with. But as we were talking, and I realized, because this week, essentially, we've really been trying to let folks know that Sharon's new novel is out there. We're taking some with us to Dallas. It's the 5th one now in the series that features the House of Stuart and the House of Sinclair, although they are protagonists in her fictional scenario, although trying to be the principalities and powers are trying to manipulate their blood behind the scenes to bring forth the Antichrist. So what is it about the houses of Stuart and Sinclair, Gary, that is so important?
Well, they come together in Scotland, both as the nobility and then the kingship, and even before the time of Robert the Bruce. And they are forming after, their power, and the Stuart family is starting to rise after 1066, when William the Conqueror, who was a Norman from Normandy, he takes the throne, and the Sinclair family moves forward, moves north towards Scotland, along with many other knights of that same national identity. And the Stuarts are starting to form as a family at that point in time. And then one of the descendants of the Stuarts is going to marry into the Bruce bloodline, because Robert the Bruce doesn't have a son. So a male marries into the Stuart and becomes the first Stuart kings. And this is a unification of all the most ennobled bloodlines coming down in the West. It is just considered as pure as that you could have it at that time. Now, the Sinclairs, their actual original name is St. Clair. And this is the name that the Rollo clan takes after expropriating Normandy from the French in around 911 BC, as I recall the date.
Or AD.
And the date is, or the name of the treaty is the Treaty of St. Clair. So they take that name. And St. Clair is also one of the families and a battle partner of Hugh de Payon in setting up the Knights Templar and doing part of the excavation and whatever they're doing in Jerusalem at that time. And so the Rollo family is the royal bloodline that comes out of the Norse, or the Tuatha De Danann, and the gods of Norway. And so they are this royal bloodline that's intermarrying with these bloodlines that we talked about coming out of the East. And so you have an ennobling of these bloodlines, and these bloodlines are intermixing also into the Stuart dynasty. And now you have some very, very high royal bloodlines, and pedigree is all important in this culture. Cult is probably a better word to say, but we'll say culture.
Putting the cult in culture, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is there can only be one right? There's only going to be one family, one bloodline that's going to rise to produce the ultimate Antichrist, and there's going to be several Antichrists, just as Jesus talks about in Matthew 24. There'll be many Antichrists and false prophets, and so staging them as being protagonists are, to me, appropriate, because you've got this power struggle that's always going on in the spurious forces, because they all want to be the ones who are going to be at the top when they complete what they say they want to do and take over the world.
And again, I think it's important not to dive too far off track, but as we talk about giants among us today, what you're talking about then is not necessarily physical giants, but those that just trace their lineage back to that incursion by the fallen realm that wants to manipulate mankind and twist it away, corrupt it into something other than what God intended.
Yes, and they say they keep their genealogies all the way back into prehistory. And that they're going to present that pedigree for Antichrist when his time comes. And so this is such an important thing to remember as we look at competing families. And you also have, another significant bloodline that's over in Spain who holds the King of Jerusalem title, which is a significantly important title to them, because the first king of Jerusalem is Baldwin in 1118 when he's crowned in a small priory on the rock of Sion with the title the King of Jerusalem, because they also take their bloodlines back not only to Nephilim but also to King Saul. And that's been scioned into their grafting of their bloodlines. And of course in Joshua, the Benjamites are given Jerusalem. So these are the descendants. Many of these are the descendants of in part of King Saul, and of course of Nephilim bloodlines that are going to produce these later Stuart kingship bloodlines. But the main ones that are involved with the Templars, who believe they're the last, they're the ancestors of the last Merovingian king, which was Dagobert. You would include de Bouillon, de Payon, and Anjou. And, of course, the Anjou create the Plantagenet, which is also intermarried into that same sort of kingships between 1066 and the time of Robert the Bruce, both in Scotland and in England. And, of course, the same sort of bloodline that most presidents take their genealogies back to King John Plantagenet of the Magna Carta era.
Yeah, and Sharon, in her Red Wing saga, also works the Plantagenet blood into the storyline as... she's done an awful lot of research on this. The Plantagenet ancestors, well, I guess I shouldn't, spoiler. Anyway, trying to, share a little bit as a tease without getting too far, giving too much away. So one of the things that's always puzzled me about these secret societies and these different groups that claim a divine right to rule, the royal bloodlines, the dragon kings, and then the secret societies like the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians and the Illuminati, whatever they are these days. Are they all working together? Are they working separately, independently from one another? How do they pull all of these strings without getting them all tangled?
Well, they do get tangled, and it's not always, this sort of kumbaya relationship. But they all have their roles, and they all have their agendas, and they're all directionally working in the same direction. And there is a hierarchy. And so, the Freemasons, at the lower levels, these are... Yes, you need to be invited to be a Mason, but you're not an adept until you're third degree York or 33rd degree Scottish Rite. And then from there, you're going to be moving into the Illuminati as you're moving up, and then the Rosicrucians are going to be higher than that. And most of the groups are going to be funneling into the adept level to report of the Freemasons or the Illuminati, or into the Rosicrucians as you sort of move up this hierarchy. But it's the orders of the royal bloodlines that is controlling all of this in the background. So the upper 50% of the Rosicrucian order are actually purebloods. And they're going to report up to the Committee of 300, which is all purebloods, and then that's going to go up to the Council of 30, the Council of 33, and then up to the 13 families. And so what you see is that there is within this pureblood order are all of these orders that they utilize that has basically the same sort of structure as these lower level secret societies. They're just only for the purebloods, and the royal family. So one of them might be the Knights of the Seraphim, which is the Swedish royal order of bloodlines, or you might have the Order of the Golden Fleece, which the King of Spain is head of, and of course he currently holds the King of Jerusalem title. And so they have all of these other special orders that they're working with that is working in behind the scenes. But they have that hierarchy, but all of these lower level secret societies, whether or not it's the Rosicrucians, which is one of the most important as being the intersection between them and the purebloods, but the Freemasons, who are created after the fall of the Templars, just like the Rosicrucians are the first one, or the Royal Society, or the Illuminati, or the Jesuits, or the Rothschilds to replace the banking, they all have their own specific agendas that are assigned to them.
Now, when you say pure blood, just to clarify, whose blood? What is it purified from?
Well, it's pure blood in terms of not having much or as little corruptions of human blood as possible. So these are the bloodlines of the Nephilim as they come down through history, and they will intermarry between the families to keep that bloodline pure. But they're always going to have to bring in some lower level of the purebloods and within the same family, but they might be very distant cousins just so that they don't develop the blood diseases.
Sure. Inbreeding.
Yeah. And of course, we see that with Habsburg's jaw and hemophiliac disease, these are typical diseases of the royal families.
Yeah. You delve into a lot of different groups here. You mentioned you've got a chapter on the Illuminati, chapter on the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Morgans, Freemasonry. You've got an entire section on the bloodlines of the prehistoric giants, and you get into such things as Leviathan, the bull cult of Melchizedek, which I found really interesting. And again, this is kind of selfish of me because it relates to research I've done. But this is chapter 83 in your book. What is this? The bull cult of Melchizedek? I thought he was a good guy.
Well, he is, but as with everything that the spurious forces do, is they like to counterfeit. Just as you're going to have a counterfeit Christ and a counterfeit prophet, a counterfeit millennium, just as Satan was wanting to create a realm like God so he could have his throne raised up like God and be like God, everything's a counterfeit. And so the Melchizedek order is obviously a great order that we refer to in Christianity and Judaism, but there is also a secret society and a polytheist order of Melchizedek, and that is the Canaanite order. And in that order, El is the god of that pantheon, as you know, with Baal being the son and Molech being the son of Baal. And so this is that counterfeit order that they have manufactured, and it's there to hide and to confuse, but they also take this order back into Canaanite history as well.
And the bull cult, because of the many references to El as bull El in Canaanite texts.
Yes, and as Molech often is depicted as having a bull's head, right? And it's I think it's also a reflection of that legacy that they bring across the flood with the religion, because it's also the same religion of the Minotaur and of antediluvian religions, where the bull was one of the most significant icons, probably because of the zodiac and celestial procession.
Right, and the four cardinal points in the Babylonian zodiac were the four faces of the seraphim.
Yeah.
Or the cherubim. I'm sorry, the cherubim, not the seraphim.
Yeah,
there's a lot more there. It's not surprising that the root behind the name Kronos, who was also El, who was also Baal Haman, who was like Molech, depicted as that bull statue where the children be lowered into the burning brazier and sacrificed to the chief god. The name Kronos is based on a Semitic word that means horns.
Yeah.
So I think this all comes back to an ancient memory of what these spirit beings, these supernatural entities, the cherubim, looked like.
Mm-hmm. I think so too as well, and it's the same, bull cult that was in Egypt. Although it's also sometimes represented as a calf, but they also have the larger bull there. I mean, these things are common in all of the polytheist religions around the world because they come out of the same source.
Gary Wayne is our guest on A View from the Bunker. His book is The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. He's also one of the featured speakers at next weekend's Hear the Watchman Conference in Dallas. So stay with us. At the bottom of the hour, we'll tell you how you can save 20% on the streaming video from that conference and see Gary's presentation in high-definition video. The end times, in the last 15 minutes or so here, if you had to project ahead on how this all plays out and fits into end times Bible prophecy, what scenario would you envision?
Well, that's a good question. I think the first thing I would always sort of premise with is that prophecy doesn't tend to be fulfilled in the way that people are expecting.
No, that's true.
I would say the first thing is for people is not to lose faith and to expect to be surprised a lot, even though we think directionally we know what's going to happen. And I also look to the time of Jesus and his coming in the first time, and the people of Judea, they knew all the prophecies, but they didn't read them in a way that they were prepared to accept the first coming. Right. And so they missed their time to accept their Messiah, and they're still paying the price for it. But of course, they're going to be redeemed. But I think if we're looking about the end time, I think it's on the horizon. I know we're not in the last 7 years yet, but I would also say that things can happen very, very quickly, particularly with cataclysms. So when we look at the stumbling block of what it takes to bring about the end time, you need to bring about world government, and you need the universal religion, and you need to have a scenario with that world government and universal religion where it permits the people of Judea to start their sacrifices on an extremity or a wing of the temple and not start a war. And so those are 3 stumbling blocks. And so I think those things can come together with the right types of cataclysms because everything else is really in place, whether or not our technology is yet quite where they want it to be able to take on God, or at least to create this facade that humans will have an ability to take on God. Those are the things that we need to keep our eye on and not get too far ahead of ourselves until those things start to come about.
What kind of technology are you talking about?
Well, again, I would look towards maybe what we see out of polytheism, where you have all of these incredibly imaginative, as what people used to think about as weapons, where they have, and you see the superheroes today, the movies using these weapons, or you have the wars that are going on in the betas where you have the ability to destroy the world. I think you have to have weapons that are powerful enough to take on gods or angels, right? And we may be there, but they haven't revealed it to us. But I think we're still working. They're still working on that in behind the scenes. So I think that still needs to happen. And I think that when we see some of these visions in end time prophecy, where you have, let's say, in the war of Joel 1 and 2. Which I believe is the Revelation War of Revelation 9.
Agreed.
You have them this concept where people use it as a negative because it doesn't sound right, where you have riders in these prophecies, and you have these beasts that are something we don't have today. And are they mechanical? Are they weapons? I think they may actually be riding these types of beasts, and these are a biological weapon that they're developing for war. I think that's a distinct possibility. So I think I always like to read the Bible literally and define the Bible, even prophecy within the Bible. And I don't find helicopters as an adequate description for what's going on in some of these situations, just as I don't think what comes out of the abyss, as these scorpion beings are mechanical beings of some sort. I think they're the Krababaloo or the Gerdabaloo that is described in Sumerian I'm tripping over my tongue here tonight, but mythology that I know you're well aware of. And if you've seen some of what those pictures look like on some of the ancient reliefs, they're pretty much identical, just as the descriptions are of what's going to come up out of the abyss. And these things were created by Tiamat in the Sumerian pantheon, and they were used to keep in check the lower gods. And so they were very powerful beings that could destroy the world. And then after Tiamat is destroyed or dies or whatever actually happens to this goddess in Sumerian history, is that they are used for guarding the sun temples and the paths to the abyss.
Oh, okay.
I have a commentary on that. If somebody wants to get a hold of me through my website, I can send it to you. And I've got the pictures of these reliefs so you get an idea what I'm talking about, and also give you the exact quote for the verbal descriptions.
Yeah, I'd like that. That will be intriguing. I tend to view, well, I'm going to hold that off because I don't want to get take up your time with my own views. But there's something clearly that we don't understand, but I think it's by design. I think God doesn't reveal exactly what's going to happen because he's called Lord of Armies, Lord of Hosts for a reason. And it was like they used to say in World War II, loose lips sink ships. Too many of us are still talking to the enemy from time to time. And so if he told us exactly what his plans were, that great deception that will already lead many astray, including the elect, if that were possible, would be even more convincingly deceptive. So we're not going to know exactly what's going on until it's right on top of us, I think. But Leviathan gets a chapter. You get a whole chapter that deals with dragons and serpents and that whole theme. Leviathan is just sort of the Hebrew conception of Tiamat, and that was a theme that you saw in a lot of ancient Near Eastern religions. This idea that the original primordial chaos was represented by this monstrous dragon.
Yeah, and again, it's in all cultures around the world, and it is the same story but told through a polytheist lens. So, actually, Tiamat is a Leviathan type creature, or also known as Lotan, and known as many other names in, like I said, all around the world. And this, one of the Leviathans is always killed in each of the accounts, just as God is the one who breaks the skull of Leviathan in the Bible. And again, I mean, we even hear in Isaiah that we're going to be dealing with this Leviathan idea in the end time, where the last one is going to be killed. So it's amazing what is out there in prehistory that we don't really connect to, that is actually verifying what Genesis and prehistory is telling us. They just have a polytheist lens. So let's say in some of the Middle East mythologies, it'll be Baal or Marduk who is going to kill this Leviathan character.
And the image of chaos, often represented in the Bible as the sea, and we see in Revelation 21, when after the new heaven and the new earth is created, there's where we finally see the sea is no more.
Yeah.
So it's you're right. It's one of the final things, one of the final enemies of God who's put away.
Yep. Exactly.
So then distill this down, at least as far as the Antichrist is concerned, just because he's one of the central figures in end times prophecy that Christians have been trying to figure out who this is going to be for the last 2,000 years. In fact, within 2 generations of John the Revelator, it was Irenaeus who tried to figure out what 666 meant, and he said, well, this cipher could be used to describe Titan, which, of course, the name of the old giant gods of the Greeks, that the Titan, although he spelled it Teitan, could be the name of the Antichrist who is to come. What are your thoughts on that? From where will the Antichrist come, and what spirit will be inside this person who winds up ruling the world for a short time?
Yeah, and I think you're bang on there, is that there's going to be more than just who is presented. And we're also told that Antichrist receives a fatal head wound. So I think he's going to be avatared by one of the angels, and he's called in the King James Version the son of perdition. And perdition goes back to a series of Greek words that includes Apollyon.
Right.
And of course, Apollyon means destroyer. It also includes Apollo, but Apollo doesn't fit the scenario, so it's got nothing to do with Apollo. Destroyer is a title. And Abaddon also means destroyer, as you take that back to Hebrew as Abad, and destroyer that's used in the word in Jeremiah 50 and 51, where you have the Antichrist going to be destroying Babylon. So he's connected as a destroyer there, and we know Antichrist destroys Babylon with the 10 kings, as it's described in Revelations. What's interesting about that is Antichrist also honors a god of forces in Daniel. And the god of forces goes back to a Hebrew word called Maus, which is rooted in a series of words like AZ, and that all means forces and fortresses and things like that. And of course, you put the EL on it to make it in a name like Michael or Gabriel, and in this case Azazel. Just as Azazel is a scapegoat in Leviticus. And we also know Azazel is the host of the angels in Enoch that's held responsible for the rebellion and is put into the abyss. That's who I think he connects back to as the son of perdition.
That is really intriguing. Yeah, Sharon and I were doing our Bible study this morning on John chapters 15 through 17, which are the kind of like the final teachings by Jesus to the disciples before going out to the Garden of Gethsemane. And so, of course, he mentions there the son of destruction, the son of Apollyon, I think is how it's in the Greek.
Yeah.
And so we got into some of that discussion.
Yeah, and I have a step-by-step commentary on that. If somebody wants to get a hold of me through my website or through Facebook, I'll send it to you either, as a Facebook commentary or as the Word document or PDF where I've got the sources and everything else on there. So, yeah, I think it's a very good possibility, and I used a word called avatar in there, which we're getting accustomed to as polytheism just sort of sweeps over our society today. And the reason why I use that is that's a concept in polytheism where it's a symbiotic kind of relationship where a god possesses a human and lives with them and they do his will. And we get this concept as a possibility of why this will work for Antichrist with Satan, and he does it seemingly in two cases. One for sure, and the other one is what I think is going on there. And when Judas is trying to finally work up to betray Jesus and get it done, that is when Satan literally enters him and avatars him to get him through it. And I think the other example is Satan when he avatars Nakash in Eden, because what we do know is Satan isn't the one who has his arms plucked off and his legs plucked off, and it was clearly an animal. It wasn't Satan. So I think he was avataring the Nakash animal.
Fascinating stuff. So your website, Genesis6conspiracy.com, and you've got a link there on your website, I see, for Connect with Gary Wayne. This is in the About the Author page. So
yes.
There's an email link there, also links to your Facebook page and Twitter page. Where do people find the book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy?
Well, you can find the book on the website. You can't order today because I've been under severe attack for about 10 days. I'm hoping to have it be in a place to take orders off that website in a day or two. So if you're interested in the book, you can't order through there, but you could contact me. You could do it through PayPal if you want to do that in the meantime, but I'll have it back up. So you can get a signed copy through the book. You can also link to the Kindle version on the buy page, and you can also link over to Amazon.com and Amazon.ca and to Barnes & Noble. It's distributed by Bookmasters out of Pennsylvania. So if you wanted to support your local bookstore, you could, and it's not on the shelf, you can have them order it in. And for people listening in Canada, it is a stock book for Chapters and Indigos.
All right. Now, I've got a copy of the Kindle version myself, so that's how I was able to reference some of the chapter titles here. It allows me to carry my entire library around inside my iPad, which is a wonderful thing. The book there's a lot in there, and it covers a lot of different topics. But boy, we're in the middle of a war that's got an enemy that's been fighting us for a long time, so there's a lot of history to cover. So
there is a lot of history, and I had to squeeze that book down. It was closer to 1,200 pages, and but I also wanted to get it published, so I knew I had to shorten it to a certain degree.
The book is taller than it is wide. Gary Wayne, the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, he'll be one of the featured speakers at the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas this coming weekend. We'll tell you how to save money on the streaming video package in just a moment. Gary, enjoyed the conversation. It went by much too quickly, but we look forward to sitting down and maybe talking with you over dinner while we're in Dallas.
Terrific. Look forward to meeting you and, talking with you at Dallas and whatever else we've got time for.
All right. Stay with us. We'll give you that information on saving money on the streaming video in just a minute. Also talk about eugenics. It is still with us today and being widely practiced here in the West. We'll tell you where and how President Trump has taken a stand against it when A View from the Bunker continues. Straight ahead.
Does God use catastrophe to mobilize his people for his glory? Is there finally definitive evidence of the actual location of Mount Sinai, the very place where God's presence was revealed in a blazing fire? New York Times best-selling author, filmmaker, and teacher Joel Richardson is back with 2 brand new works that take these subjects head-on. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Joel Richardson 2-book special offer. This special offer includes The Mystery of Catastrophe, where you'll learn to view catastrophes in an entirely new light. You will see firsthand how God uses natural and man-made disasters to specifically position people to hear the gospel of the one and only true God and receive salvation through his Son, Jesus Christ. This must-read book will walk you step by step down the eschatological road of biblical prophecies to offer meaning and hope to individuals that are suffering. In this timely 2-book special offer, you'll also receive Mount Sinai in Arabia, the true location revealed. Complete with more than 50 full-color photographs and maps, this beautiful work takes a look at the biblical evidence for Mount Sinai being in the land of Midian, Mount Sinai in ancient Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, the evidence that Paul journeyed to Mount Sinai, the discovery of Moses' altar, the golden calf, and so much more. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $40. Yours now for your donation of only $25 plus shipping and handling. Now's your chance to get both of these incredible new books at one super low price. Order the Joel Richardson special offer online now at the Skywatch TV store or call 844-750-4985.
Live from the Missouri Ozarks every Sunday night, this is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week, the common ground between the modern UFO phenomenon and end times Bible prophecy. Darren Geisinger joins us, the author of Zero G's, The Armor Eternal. And we'll also talk about why he uses fiction to tell the story and make the explanations. Again, that's next Sunday night. That is March 31st here on A View from the Bunker. That will be a pre-recorded episode, by the way, because we will be in Dallas. Sharon and I, along with many of the speakers there, including Gary Wayne. And although the conference is nearly sold out, I think there may be a few tickets left. The hotel is booked. This is the Hilton DFW Lakes Conference Center. So if you're planning to attend, you'll have to find accommodations elsewhere. Now, there are other hotels in and around Grapevine, Texas, which is close to the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. So plenty of hotels in the area. If you're interested, you can still check hearthewatchman.com as the website if you'd like to go to the conference. Make sure you use the promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20, and that saves you $20 on the tickets. But if you can't make the travel arrangements that quick, You can still stream the video, high-definition video from the Dallas conference, and that will include Gary's presentation, mine, L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar, Pastor Carl Gallups, Rabbi Zev Parat, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Stephen Bankar's, Josh Peck's co-author on the important book, The Second Coming of the New Age, and many more. Pastor Casper McLeod, Pastor Paul Begley, just a wonderful lineup of speakers, and, Irvin Baxter of End Time Ministries. Looking forward to explaining Exodus 38 and 39 to him. Ha ha. I say that tongue-in-cheek, of course, because he's been studying end times prophecy for a lot longer than I have. So I'm looking forward to hearing his talk. And, of course, Gary's talk, which I understand will focus on Matthew 24, as it was in the days of Noah and so on. But I was also glad during our conversation that he linked it to the parallel chapter in passages in Luke that said, and likewise as it was in the days of Lot. So that'll be one of the subjects that Gary will draw on in his talk. And again, if you want to stream the video, it's not real time, but the presentations are uploaded to a Vimeo site, vimeo.com, Vimeo, within about an hour. And the reason they do that then is that Vimeo can serve up the video without having to depend on a live video feed coming from a hotel. Because we got like 500 or 600 people all hitting the hotel Wi-Fi at the same time. Things can get a little dicey. So hearthewatchmen.com is the website. And if you use the promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20, that'll save you 20% on the video stream. And that knocks about $10 off the cost, which is not a bad deal. And you have access to the videos for 6 months after the conference. So 6 months access to all of the presentations, time to watch them again, invite friends over, bring them up on the screen, use a monitor at church and, share it with a Bible study. So anyway, Mike Kerr and Jeannie Moore making it very, very affordable and very available. And it all gets underway next Friday in Dallas. So last week, we had a rather eye-opening talk with Robert Blaze, who's the producer of a new film, a documentary called Human Weeds, which is available through iTunes, Cineve, and through Amazon Prime. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can watch Human Weeds for no charge. He interviewed a number of people, several, in fact, that Tom Horn interviewed for the film Inhuman, Tom's documentary on transhumanism. Robert took it in a slightly different direction, in which he interviews a number of people who are supporters of the transhumanist movement, but also gets into the topic of eugenics, which many of us, even if we've heard of eugenics, that's the practice of weeding out the unfit from the human gene pool. In its most basic description, it's essentially what Hitler and the Nazis were trying to create, trying to create the master race, weeding out inferior genes. Well, that practice, again, many of us assumed, ended with the end of World War II. When the Nazis were defeated, they went away and eugenics went away, and we don't do that anymore. Even though, we here in the United States actually developed the programs that the Nazis adapted for their use in the 1930s. Eugenics began here in Indiana. And as Robert Blaze pointed out last week, there were places here in the United States where sterilization of the unfit was taking place without the knowledge of those who were being sterilized in some cases, many cases, into the 1970s, 1980s. So this is not all that long ago. But the fact is, it's still going on. It's just been rebranded as transhumanism. It's also been rebranded as a woman's right to choose. Sadly, the most dangerous place for an unborn child in New York City these days, if you're an African-American baby, is inside your mother's womb. And I'm not saying that to be nasty, that's just a statistical fact. As more than half of the African-American unborn children in New York City are terminated before they're born. Well, there are other types of children who are being terminated before birth as well. And there are some places in the world that are taking great pride in this. Today is March 24th. A few days ago, the world celebrated World Down Syndrome Day. Down Syndrome Day, March 21st, 321. It represents the 3 copies of the 21st chromosome carried by people with Down syndrome. This day was declared back in 2011 by the United Nations General Assembly. So around the world, every year, March 21st is Down Syndrome Day. Now, the theme of this year's World Down Syndrome Day was hashtag Leave No One Behind. But we point out that last year, CBS News reported that Iceland, and this was a very positive report, in fact, Iceland is close to eradicating Down syndrome because of prenatal screening. Now think about that for just a moment. Prenatal screening is a mixed blessing. It can identify diseases being in the unborn child before birth. And, as a parent, I can see how that would be beneficial, to know what your child is, may be contending with before he or she is born. But the problem is, in our world today, because most of us in the world no longer consider human life sacred, because we've been created as God's imagers. We are his image bearers on earth. When God said, let us create man in our image, he didn't mean, humans look like me. God is not necessarily, God the Father, not necessarily a biped, but it means we are his moral agents on earth. And as such, all human life is sacred, regardless of how smart we are, how handsome or pretty we are, how athletic we are, how smart we are, or how, challenged we are in any of those areas. Doesn't matter. All of us are God's image bearers, and as such, our lives should be protected. But because of prenatal screening on Iceland, children with Down syndrome are terminated before birth almost 100% of the time. In other words, eugenics is being practiced to eliminate Down syndrome. Nearly 100% in Iceland. Denmark is right behind Iceland. 98% of children with Down syndrome aborted. In France, 77%. And here in the United States, as many as 67%, 2 of every 3, terminated before birth. Now, our daughter was, and is to this day, thankfully, been mainly very healthy. So I cannot speak to the experience of somebody, of being a parent of a child who is born with Down syndrome. But this is a really, really slippery slope on which we in the Western world find ourselves. Prenatal screening has made this available to us. We can identify this particular disease and some others in the womb. But it appears that the pressure on parents to terminate is sometimes not very subtle. Now, if you've ever been around someone with Down syndrome, you know that these are some of the most loving and joyous people you will ever meet, in spite of their limitations. Many of them have fulfilling jobs. Many are married and in very loving and satisfying relationships. Research shows that 99% of people with Down syndrome are happy with their lives. Now, raising a child with Down syndrome has its challenges, no question. But here in the United States, we kill 2 out of every 3 and deny them the chance to have a happy, fulfilling life. And in other parts of the Western world, the termination rate of children with Down syndrome before birth is even higher. And in Iceland, they say to their pride, they've almost exterminated it. Why? Because selective abortion. In other words, eugenics. Well, Donald Trump, God bless him, on World Down Syndrome Day, said Today, we celebrate the lives and achievements of Americans with Down syndrome. Vice President Mike Pence and I will always stand with these wonderful families, and together we will always stand for life. Hashtag World Down Syndrome Day. So, President Trump taking a stand for life and a stand against eliminating these wonderful, loving, joyous people because of what we perceive as a limitation. Speaking of abortion, Governor of State of Utah has signed into law legislation to protect unborn babies with Down syndrome. House Bill 166, called the Down Syndrome Non-Discrimination Abortion Act, would prohibit women from getting abortions after a prenatal screen indicates that their unborn child has Down syndrome. The measure was sponsored by Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby. Contains a trigger provision that spells out that the ban will not take effect until a court rules on its constitutionality. But the bill was signed by Governor Gary Herbert on Friday into law. So we'll see how this proceeds through the courts. Now, while that's going on, CNN, on the other hand, or host on CNN, I should say, not the channel as a whole, but one of the hosts on CNN, Trevor Noah, I said CNN. No, that's the comedy network, isn't it? Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Yeah, Comedy Central. Anyway, yeah, he's celebrating the president of Planned Parenthood. Essentially, a fanboy reaction when she appeared on his show. Well, look, children are a gift from God. That's all there is to it. And sometimes they're more challenging than others. Some children are more challenging than others. Some of us parents, self-included, a little more challenging to our children than other parents. But I, for one, am glad that Donald Trump and the state of Utah taking this stand on behalf of people with Down syndrome. And hats off to Chick-fil-A, which has gotten an awful lot of bad press over the last couple of years because of the personal beliefs, the Christian faith of its CEO. And the fact that they won't open on Sundays as a nod to their belief that God decreed a day of rest. And, of course, social justice warriors on the left have taken that to mean that the chain discriminates against LGBTQ+, which they don't. It's just the fact that the owner holds a biblical view of morality, of sexuality, has led the social justice crowd to single out Chick-fil-A as a target. Now, Chick-fil-A locations have announced an event called Daddy-Daughter Date Night. One of their restaurants in Kansas, a Chick-fil-A in Kansas, started this about 9 years ago, and now hundreds of them are following suit. This is a big deal because girls, especially when they get into their teen years, if we fathers have not done a proper job of telling them how special they are and how loved they are then open to the first guy who comes along and says and tells them how pretty they are. I heard a very wise preacher say something like this, maybe 20 years ago. Dad, make sure that the first sleazeball who comes along and wants to have his way with your daughter isn't the first one to tell her how pretty she is. So Chick-fil-A hosting an event, Daddy-Daughter Date Night. Little girls dress up like princesses. The restaurants redecorate to turn the whole restaurant into kind of a fairy tale scene with special menus, tablecloths, flowers, balloons. Some dads have even taken it a step further and hire a limo for the night to take their daughter out to dinner at Chick-fil-A. So if you've got a Chick-fil-A near you and you've got a daughter, might be worth a phone call just to find out if they're part of this. And just make that a special date night. That'll be one of those memories that will come back someday. You may even forget that that you did this 20 years from now. If you've got a young daughter, she may surprise you. And remember that thing. So that's happened to me a couple of times. Things that I said in passing that seemed like no big deal at the time. Our daughter, who's 29 now, has come back and said a couple of times, I've always remembered that you said that. Like, okay. But that's something that stuck with me, and I tried to make that part of my parenting style, which was by no means perfect, but yeah, our words carry a lot of weight with our children, far more than we realize. So, Dad, if you've got daughters, young ones especially, check out and see if you can take part in Chick-fil-A's Daddy-Daughter Date Night. Hey, it's worth it just for the waffle fries. Of course, I'm kidding. Meanwhile, there are other companies that are going in the other direction and trying to celebrate the deconstruction of God's design for the human family. United Airlines is the latest. They are going full-on woke. United Airlines has had a lot of bad press over the last few years. Late flights, meltdowns on the plane, animals dying inside a plane. So in effort to try to improve its image with the public, somebody inside the marketing department at United Airlines decided it would be a good idea to become the first American airline, the first United States airline to allow passengers to fly under whatever gender they choose. What does this mean, really? It means nothing. I mean, if you're flying outside the country, your passport is still going to be divided into male and female based on your biology, which by the way, is your true gender. But United Airlines has announced it's become the first U.S. airline to offer non-binary gender options throughout all booking channels. Yay. Mr., Ms., and now, I don't know how we pronounce this, MUX? MX? Yeah, maybe mix? Mix makes more sense, actually. This apparently is a term that's been floating around since 2015, and United Airlines is announcing, look, I'm not sure United Airlines really has thought this through all the way. Because while this may be an idea that seems really cool to people in certain places here in the U.S., cities mostly, there are a lot of places here in the country where this is not going to make people more inclined to fly United Airlines. Gender dysphoria, which is it's the condition in which one believes one is a gender other than one's own biology, which until recently was considered a psychological condition by the professional community and psychiatric community, and correctly afflicts very, very few people. We're talking less than 1% of the public. So why offering a non-binary gender that hypothetically would benefit less than 1% of the general public, and perhaps even less than that of the people who actually need to fly? Why United Airlines marketing department thought this was a good idea, I really, really don't know. Because that begs the question. Well, no, I don't want to be mean-spirited about this because, Jesus Christ died for all of us, including those who are confused about who they are. At one point or another, all of us are confused for one reason or another. But, boy, you just look at something like this and think, maybe just trying to fly on time and make sure the luggage gets there undamaged. Maybe that would be a better thing than just non-binary gender option when you book your airline tickets. And one final note, a scholar has actually taken this idea that we can be whatever we think we are to its ridiculous extreme. A scholar from Finland had an article published in the Journal of Medical Ethics. He's a bioethicist by trade, in which he attempted to make a moral case for legally changing a person's age to correspond with that person's experienced age. In other words, he believes we should have the right to change our legal age to whatever we want. Juna Rasanen of the University of Oslo in Norway wrote a paper titled A Moral Case for Legal Age Change. Says there are 3 scenarios when a change to one's legal age should be allowed. When a biological age is recognized to be significantly different from his chronological age, when a person genuinely feels his age differs significantly from his chronological age, you're only as old as you feel, right? And when age change would likely prevent, stop, or reduce ageism, discrimination due to age he would otherwise face. Now, this sounds silly, like a case for of a social justice warrior just looking for a cause to attach his name to, and maybe that's what's going on here. But there are some implications to this that are just a little bit disturbing. We can kind of laugh about this. Okay, right. Changing your legal age to match the age you feel. Okay, I feel 65, so I should get Medicare. All right? Well, that ain't going to happen, obviously. But what if it goes the other direction? And in fact, a reporter actually asked the scholar this. What if a pedophile changes his legal age to, say, 8, so that he can have sex with children and not face legal consequences? Well, Rosanen said, well, children cannot consent to sex, and that explains why sex with a child is wrong. Well, no, sex with a child is wrong because it's just wrong. From a biblical standard, really, any physical relations with anyone other than your spouse is considered wrong. But with children, psychologically, physically, it really messes children up. That's why it's wrong. Anyway, he said, if a pedophile changes his age to 8 to molest children, it is still unethical to have sex with someone who chronologically is 8 because it is unethical for two 8-year-olds to have sex with each other. Well, the problem is there are activists out there who would argue with him on that point. This is disturbing. But even right here, he kind of contradicts his own argument. Because if he's trying to make the case that we should change our legal age, be allowed to change our legal age to whatever we feel, except we shouldn't do it in this case because that would be wrong. Well, okay, now we're already admitting that we do discriminate on the basis of age, and there are some good reasons not to allow people to change their age to what they think. Now we're just arguing over where to draw those lines. In which case I say, let's just leave well enough alone. You are as old as your birth certificate says you are. Assuming the birth date hasn't been tampered with. But that's where we are in this world today. Minds so open, our brains are falling out. Well, you hear the Watchman Conference again coming up this, just less than a week now. We'll be flying to Dallas on Thursday and meeting folks there on Friday morning. As the sessions begin, I'll be talking at, I think, about 2:30 on Friday afternoon. Sharon is hosting the lunch. Well, she's the featured speaker, I should say, the keynote speaker at the Lunch with the Speakers. And so if you are going to be in Dallas, we look forward to meeting you. Do come up and say hello to us while we are there. And then going forward, we've got a lot of other interesting things going on. The following week, April 7th, I am remiss in not having mentioned this, April 7th, Sharon and I will be at Southside Apostolic Faith Church in Joplin, Missouri. So if you're in southwest Missouri, eastern Kansas, northeast Oklahoma, and you can make it to Joplin, we'll be there. It's the link is at my website, derekpgilbert.com. There's a map there that shows you how to get to it. Southside Apostolic Faith Church, speaking at the 10 o'clock service, and again at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And there'll be a great potluck lunch in between. So Pastor Brian Moser, very gracious to invite us, and we look forward to being there for that. Then, of course, in May, our tour of Israel and Jordan, followed by a trip to the UK. We're going to be scouting out some of the sites that Sharon writes about in her Red Wing saga and bringing back some video that we will share with you in the months ahead. The first annual Skywatch TV Defender Conference, that is coming up in August 2nd through 4th. That is sold out. But details on the streaming video coming. We will open up the streaming video early in May for that conference. You'll have an opportunity to see Dr. Michael Heiser, Joel Richardson, Pastor Carl Gallups, Dr. Michael Lake, and many others. Sharon and I speaking at that conference as well. Music by Dino Kartsanakis. So Don't miss it. Streaming video packages will start opening up for registration in May. The True Legends Conference, answering the alien question, coming back to Branson, Missouri, September 13th through the 15th. Sharon and I will be there. I'll be serving as a master of ceremony, so hopefully we'll see you there. And in October, we'll tell you more about this in the weeks and months ahead. The Unsealed Scroll Prophecy Conference, October 4th through 6th at the Grand Hyatt in San Antonio with Rabbi Jonathan Kahn, L.A. Marzulli, Pastor Carl Gallups, Bill Salas, Jim Barfield of the Copper Scroll Project, and more. And Sharon and I, honored to be a part of that group, both of us speaking at that conference. Again, we'll tell you about that in the weeks and months ahead. A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Please leave us a review at Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever else you find us, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. And give us a like at our View from the Bunker page on Facebook. Our opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod. His website is www.incompetech.com. Our announcer, D.C. Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.